Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. I thank you all for coming. Tonight's topic is going to be just the basics, using Adobe Lightroom to optimize your clinical photos for the web. And today is not March 22nd, it's April 26th. So, alrighty, let's get started. So, for those of you who know me, I'm Dr. David Wank. I'm a practicing general dentist in New York City, and I'm the president of Short Hills Design, which is a internet marketing company for dentists and physicians. We build websites, we do SEO, we do marketing automation, we do lots of things for you. So let's move ahead now and introduce Aestheto Dental Labs. They are our sponsor for this evening. I've known Mark, the owner, for many, many, many years. They're a full-service dental lab in Maplewood, New Jersey. They're in New York City and in the tri-state area in New Jersey. They do hundreds of CEs throughout the year. I present at many of them. If you need a lab, you want to try a lab, give Mark a call. The quality is excellent. The prices are good. You can find him at aestheto.com. So, tonight, what we're going to do is, we are going to keep it at 40 minutes or 45 minutes. We're going to do a 5-minute introduction just about Lightroom and what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the web design workflow for 5 minutes, just so we have an idea of where we fit in space here. We're then going to take about 10 minutes of slides just to go over a beginner's guide to photo optimization. Regardless of what program you use, we've got to be able to understand why we're optimizing and what the big concepts are. Then we're going to actually go into Lightroom and play around. We are going to crop photos and we're going to export photos. And then from there, we're going to go over some questions. We'll leave 5 minutes for that if we need it. All right, so first thing we're going to do now is we'll do our introduction. So basic computer knowledge is what you need here. Lightroom can get messy, like any program. What we're doing tonight, it doesn't even get through the enamel. I mean, it's so thin, what we're doing tonight, but it will be helpful. You could apply it tomorrow. The recording will be available a few days after the presentation. Those of you who have done Webinar Wednesday before know you'll get an email with the recording, with the recording of the recording. And if you want a copy of the slides, feel free to send me an email and I'll get you those. Now, if you have questions, your control panel for GoToWebinar has a raise your hand feature, so you can use that and type in your question. There's time where we're going to be in the software, so I won't be able to see that you're raising your hand, but certainly I will check before we go into the software and after. I do want to keep it at 45 minutes. I will stay late, as late as you guys need if you have questions for me. But for those people who want to, really do 45 minutes and be done, I want to, keep it honest there. Okay. The take-home message for tonight is that you want to keep your photos and your images as small as practically possible. And what you're doing is you want to have images that are high enough in resolution that they look good, that they're quality, that people can see what you want to show them, but small enough to load quickly. That's the key. And the parallel really is Alara. It's exactly the same thing. So I mean, this slide needs no, Alara needs no introduction. So hopefully from that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. As high resolution as possible with as low radiation as possible. Same exact concept. So why does size matter when it comes to images? Well, number one, when you visit a website, when I visit a website, if an image takes a very long time to load, it's frustrating and it makes you want to leave the website. And of course, one of the things we want to do is keep people engaged. And again, since Google, one of their goals other than making money, in this author's opinion, is their goal really is though to make the web a better place in that regard, so in the sense that user experience really matters. So if an image takes a long time to load, it's a problem for people. And so along those lines, page speed, which is your load time, is a factor in SEO rankings. And, most of you, I'm sure, have heard that already. If you haven't, you'll know that, again, how long your page takes to load is an important factor, or can be. When you think about SEO, this is a slide I pulled from my link building webinar, but here are just some of the factors that go into SEO. I have alt tags here twice. Well, they're not that important to be there twice. That's a mistake. But the point is here, there were a lot of things that go into it. And the truth is, not to get into the weeds too much, but when you get into SEO, a lot of it has to do with competition. So if you were in the middle of a town where you're the only dentist within 30 miles, your page speed is less relevant, because if someone searches for dentist in my town and you're the only dentist in the town, too bad, that's all they've got. If you're in New York City, if you're in, a large metro area where you've got, 20 dentists within 2 blocks, then it becomes a competition. So what happens with page speed, and again, well, let me back up. With page speed, for example, if your page speed, you want to have your page speed around 3 to 4 seconds ish, 2 to 4. Sometimes we can get clients down to 1.5 seconds or 3 seconds, and it depends where you test from and how you test. But you want to be, let's say, in that 2 to 3 range ish, and not 10. So if you are at 10 seconds, which is bad to load a page, and your competitors are around 2 to 3 seconds each, that's a problem. We're not going to split hairs that you're 3.1 seconds and your competitor's 3.2 seconds. That I don't care about. But in general, you want a site that loads quickly. And one of the things that really cramps down on a website speed that'll kill you there is the size of the images. So again, the key on this slide is that here are the foundations and here are some of the factors. And the truth is, we have no idea what the actual the weight is of each of these. You could argue that mobile ready in 2 or 3, 4 years ago was tremendous when Google first came out and said, hey, page speed, mobile ready is critical. Now, since basically, I'd like to hope almost everybody's mobile ready, it might not be as big a weight. So same thing with, all sorts of issues. Your page speed, again, I put it as small. I don't know, SSL, it's tiny. By the end of the summer, I'll be giving a webinar about SSL because that is up and coming. Should you switch to SSL today? Not really. Within the next year or two, most likely. But again, I don't know how much of a factor that is, and I don't know how much it's going to change. But we do know that page speed is a factor, so this does tie in. So the take-home message is that you want your images to load quickly, to be small and efficient, because A, it's better for people, and in making it better for people, it's better for search engines. It's one of those things where you actually, if you make it good for people, it actually does work out for search engines, and that's a plus. So, briefly, the Web Design Workbook for Dentists. We're not going to get into the book tonight. You could look at it at webdesignworkbook.com. But the reason I bring it up is because in the book, which I wrote, again, just as an overview of what you need to know before you buy, it's not a how-to book. It's not how to make your own website from scratch. It's what you need to know before you buy. We had our driveway retard a couple of years ago, and all I cared about was to make sure that when they retard it, they filled in the gaps, and that water didn't pool and they didn't scratch the bricks. What kind of gasoline they used in the machine, or the particle size of the tar, whatever it was, it doesn't matter to me. And so that's kind of what the book does. And what I always go through during my lectures is this web design workflow. Actually, next month's webinar is going to be just specifically about this. But tonight, understand that phase 1 is planning, development, and setup. You want to have a website that's built to Google standards, because at the end of the day, we said we don't know which of these factors is going to make your website rank or not rank. And it's the same thing when I was in dental school, I was an ice hockey goalie, which, whether that's a good decision or not is open to debate, but I didn't know where I was going to get hit with the puck. So I certainly kept every part of my body protected. I couldn't go out there and say, well, I'm not going to wear a right pad because no one's going to shoot at my right leg. And same thing here. If you're that dentist in the middle of the barren town with no other competitors in 30 miles, probably not as important being up to standards. If you're the dentist in New York City or the metro area where there's 20 dentists within a mile of you or within a block of you, then I don't know what the other dentists are going to bring to the table. Eventually, they'll probably all be up to standards, but I'd rather have you out there. And again, this doesn't mean you're using us for your websites. Whoever you're using for your websites, this is an agnostic concept. I want you to make sure that you're up to standards, because then at a minimum, well, at a maximum, you're the best and you'll rank above everybody. At a minimum, you'll be in the conversation. And so that's where that goes. And that's not a secret, by the way. There's no magic. We don't know, again, what the weight is, but we do know what certain things are relevant. Now, phase 2, which we're not discussing tonight. So the image stuff comes in here in phase 1. Phase 2 is driving traffic. Something I feel like I wind up talking about all the time is So you have your website done, and you come to me, and they say, "Well, David, what do I do?" And the question is, do you have a traffic problem, or do you have a messaging problem? And so phase two was all about driving traffic, search engine work, social media. If you're doing pay per click, you don't have to be. Any kind of marketing you're doing, we're doing lead generation now. So anything that you do to drive traffic is traffic, is getting it out there. And anything you do in phase three, once you have that traffic, that is going to be your instead of being traffic driving, that's going to be your messaging. So here in phase two, I have 50 new patients I brought into my office. Let's say phase three, I can't sell a cosmetic case to any of them, which means I don't have a traffic problem. I've got a messaging problem. But I've got to get those 50 people in the chair before I try and sell them something. Because clearly I can't sell a whitening case or whatever it is, a cosmetic case to nobody, to an empty chair. And please have a backup. So, okay. Absolute beginner's guide to photo optimization. And don't forget, ask the questions if you need them. I will be here after. You can certainly ask them in the question panel. So, what's the big picture? And again, this is for any images that you do. Even if you're going to take images of your family and upload them and send them off to your photo processor, these are the things that you want to do. So regardless of the software, regardless of whatever you're doing. So the first thing that you want to do is back them up. Make a copy. You're in the office, you have your SD card, you take your photos. What I want you to do is, please don't leave the card in there. I mean, look, you will, but take the card, throw it into the computer, and if nothing else, copy it out. Ideally, what you want to do, you're going to have your own workflow, and if you have questions, ask me. If there's enough demand, I will give a webinar on how to organize photos and all sorts of things like that. For now, just do yourself a favor. Put the SD card in the computer or in the card reader, copy what's off there, make some folder called originals, and every time you put that SD card in there, copy those files into the original, and then and then make a separate folder called working. So copy them into the originals, and then when you're ready to play with them, copy them into working. This way you never ever touch those originals. And if you want, throw those originals into Dropbox or to an unlimited online backup service. Just please have a copy. Okay, crop. So what cropping does, cropping is important. Now, the reason you want to crop before you do anything else, once you've backed up, is because you want to remove the extra parts of the images that you don't need. And the reason you do that is because, when we have our digital cameras, you can get files that are, huge, 10 megs, 20 megs, these huge files. And when you have these huge files, the more work the computer has to do to process, the longer it takes. With 1 or 2 images, it doesn't matter. With 30, it makes a difference. So in this example, I took, I wish I took this picture. This is a stock image. And so I only needed the picture here at the bottom of the salad. And so if I decided to take this image and add, change the colors or add some exposure or do something with it, I would spend computer time processing all this stuff above which doesn't have to get done. So by cropping it, number one, it lets me focus on what I need to do. And number two, it makes this whole process a lot faster because the computer isn't wasting time dealing with extra pixels and extra information to deal with. So then you edit. Editing the image is whether you're going to change the exposure, the colors, red eye, take the healing brush. The healing brush, for example, lets you have a beautiful picture of those veneers, but there's a teeny tiny bit of blood on the gingiva and in an otherwise gorgeous picture. So what do? You can use, there's a clone stamp tool, there are healing brushes. Lightroom can do a little of that. That's more the job of Photoshop, but that's where you get into editing. And that's out of the scope of this webinar because it would take a long time. Again, if there's interest in it, I'll do one where if someone wants to volunteer a clinical photo, we can clean the blood out or do whatever it happens to be. So that's just so you know. And then export. Exporting is great. And when I think about exporting, think about your master cast for a cast partial. When you get an image out of your camera, and for those of you shooting in RAW, you understand this as well. And if you don't know what I mean by RAW, don't worry about it. But RAW images are huge. And again, even these 20, these 10, 15, these huge megapixel photos that come out of your camera, they are designed as those master casts, so to speak. And there's a ton of information in those files. And what you're going to do is you're going to shrink that file down. You're going to save it for the purpose you need to be. So think about it like this. So border mold final impression for an upper partial, cast partial, and you send it to the lab. The patient calls you the next day and says, you know what? I don't want a cast partial. I want a transitional. That's fine. They can still use that master model that they poured in Greenstone to go ahead and to make a transitional. Not a big deal. However, if you're going to make a transitional and you took a grade alginate and you poured it in Yellowstone, and then you wanted to make a cast partial on that, you could do it, but it's better, to have it poured in Greenstone. So think about it like that. These original files, these huge files, are your Greenstone. And you can use your Greenstone to make a cast partial, or you could use your Greenstone to make a transitional. But that's the idea. So for the web, for example, if you want to use a file for the web, they're actually very, very small file sizes compared to what you'd use if you wanted to use an image on a letterhead or on a t-shirt. To put a number out there, and again, you don't have to know this, the web uses 72 dots per inch and print uses 300 dots per inch, just to give you an idea of the quality of image you need. So here's just an example of an image. Again, this is the salad image. And my question for you is, do you see a real difference in any of these images? And the answer is, for the most part, no. Here is the original. I don't have the size there, but I took it down by about 75%, and it's a 1.5 megabyte file. I took it down by about 50%, and it's a 567 kilobytes down to 227 at 25% of size. So what I've done is I've gone probably at least 75-80% down, and at this level, at this size that you can see on your screen, you probably can't tell much of a difference. And if you could, I don't think it really takes away from the image, and that's the whole point. You don't need, let's say this image is 2 megs, you don't need to have to load a 2 megabyte image when a 227 kilobyte image would do just as good a job for what you want. So here's a great example. Here's 2 images that we got from stock, iStock Photo, 18.9 megs, Shutterstock, 13.2 megs. And we reduced the Shutterstock image to 70 kilobytes and the iStock to 64. And I'm telling you, for what we used it for on these websites, or this website, it's fine. And look, and if you had to bring it up to 90 to make it a little bit better, that's fine. But you certainly don't want to mess with, a 13 megabyte image on your website. So let's talk about Lightroom. So why Lightroom? The reason I like Lightroom is because it just works for the things that I think that we need to do. It is dirt cheap. It's $10 a month subscription from Adobe, and it comes with Photoshop. So, to have access to those 2 programs for $10 a month is incredible. I probably spend that much a day in coffee. So it works. The other thing that I really like about it, from all the programs I've seen, it does a fantastic job doing bulk exports. So you take 30 images in the office that day, or you take 80 because you had a handful of new patients. You don't want to do these by hand. You throw them into Lightroom, and Lightroom can process 80 images lickety-split. And it has an incredible number of features, and I cannot remotely get into 99.9% of them, but it is a workhorse, and it's fantastic. Photoshop versus Lightroom, because people ask that. So Lightroom is designed to organize and catalog and bulk process your images. If you want to take all of your images and make them black and white, you could do that in an instant. If you want to take them and the exposure was off that day and apply an exposure to 40 images, no problem. So what you can do is really manage your whole course of action there. And about 90% of the editing that you're going to want to do, you could do in Lightroom. And when it comes to Photoshop, Photoshop is more for chopping things up. Photoshop is if you want to take a person, cut their smile out, and put it on a giraffe, Photoshop is very, very good at that. If you want to work with complex layers, Photoshop is really, really good at that. So that's just to show you. So most of the time, you will not have to go into Photoshop. So there are 2 questions, and let's just see here. Okay, someone asked what is considered small for the web. We'll get into that. And what happens with the photos if you stop paying $10 a month. So the way Lightroom stores photos is it stores them on your desktop, And so if you stop using Lightroom, you will lose all of the kind of organizational things that you made. And and you can export what you've done. If you take a photo and you have a denture that's, a pink denture, and you paint it blue, and then you save it and export it as a blue denture, as long as you've exported the file, it's fine. Think of Lightroom as just take the ion crowns you have in your office. So your ion crowns from 3M come with a very, very nice drawer. At least in our office, we have those. You could certainly take the drawer away, and the ion crowns will still be there. So Lightroom as it organizes it, but because your photos are stored on your hard drive, which you better be backing up, ladies and gentlemen, you do not lose anything if you stop paying for Lightroom. I hope that answers the question. And again, it runs on a Windows and a Mac exactly the same way, and that's fantastic. Okay, so next. So what were the other choices, and why am I skipping them? iPhoto was discontinued. Apple Photo, there were many fewer features versus Lightroom, and before this webinar, I went in there and said maybe it is pretty good, and it's just not for what we need, for what we have to do in the bulk of photos that we take. Even for your family photos, I use Lightroom for my family photos. Apple Preview now, for in an emergency, Apple Preview is pretty good. You can double click a file, you can crop it, you can hit the export button, drag the size down a little bit, and it will work. But again, it's not as comprehensive as Lightroom. And MS Paint, you can do it. It's brutal, but you can do it. I just think Lightroom is a better choice. So, okay. So what I want to do now is spend some time working in Lightroom. And so, here's a preview. Next month, what we're doing is we're going to do the web design workflow explained, that workflow I showed you. And then at some point, we're going to do something about the Americans with Disabilities Act and website compliance, because that has come up on Dentaltown a lot. A lot of my clients are asking me about it. And unfortunately, it's a mess right now because there's no hard and fast rule about what we as dentists have to do to comply, or any small businesses, but there are still lawsuits flying around. So that's one that we are going to talk about. So let's jump into Lightroom now.